Okay, so we've talked about one method, which is really review of how to graph an equation, a certain type of an equation that has x and y in it, or just an x, or just a y. And the ones that have x and y in them, we talked about how to graph them using a table of values, which is again something that you should be familiar with. The next way to graph them is actually kind of nice because you never have to solve for y. You can work right with the equation as it is. So sometimes the table of values might be the easier thing to do. Sometimes this method might be easier. Sometimes the third method that we'll talk about tomorrow might be easier to do. So this is called the intercepts method, and we only find 2 points on the line. We find the point where the line crosses the x-axis, and we find the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay? So you can see here, this line has 2 points on it. Okay? And here's where it crosses the y-axis. Here's where it crosses the x-axis. What is the coordinate where it crosses the y-axis? What coordinate is that? 0, 4. Okay. So we'll just put this. What about the point where it crosses the x-axis? -2, 0. Okay. What if I drew, and you don't have to draw these, but if I drew, say, another line? Like that. What's the point where this one crosses the y-axis? 0, 2. What's the point where it crosses the x-axis? 2, 0. Look at the 2 lines. What do you notice about the points where it crosses the y-axis? Yes, the x-coordinate will always be 0. Okay? So where it crosses the y-axis, x is 0. What do you notice about where it crosses the x-axis? Y is 0. Okay? So the point where it crosses the y-axis, 0, 4, okay? We call this the y-intercept. Kind of makes sense, where it intercepts the y. Okay? And we say the y-intercept, we don't use the point to name the y-intercept. We just use the y value. So we say that the y-intercept itself is just 4. It crosses at 0, 4, or it intercepts at 0, 4, but the y-intercept is just 4. Okay? Whenever a point intercepts the y-axis, the x-coordinate is always 0. That's important because that's going to help us find the intercepts when we're given an equation. Okay. And so for the point where it crosses the x-axis, well, what do you think we call that one? Yeah. So we call this the x-intercept. And we say the x-intercept is just the x value. So we say the x-intercept for the line is -2. Similarly, whenever a point intercepts the x-axis, the y-coordinate will always be 0. Okay. So we use that reasoning to find the 2 points and sketch the graph. So to use the intercepts method, what we're going to do, it doesn't matter which one we find first. We take the equation, find the x value when y equals 0 in the equation. That's going to be your x-intercept. That's going to be where it crosses the x-axis. Okay? So this is the x-intercept. That's one of the points. But as always, you need at least 2 points to draw a line. So we need to find the y value when x is 0. In the equation. This will give you the point where it crosses the y-axis. So this is the y-intercept. Oh, sorry, I should have put, that's the x-intercept up there. This is the y-intercept. Now that you got the 2 points, plot the 2 points, draw the line. Plot the 2 points and draw the line. Give you a little bit of time to finish writing that down if necessary. And then we'll look at an example. What's going on with emails now? Okay. So as an example, using the intercepts method, here we have an equation It's got an X and Y in it, which means it's going to be a slanted line when we graph it. Except we just don't know which way it slants or how steep or flat it is. Okay, so we've got to get a couple of points in order to do that. So for the table of values, you'd have to do some algebra first. You'd have to solve for Y and then pick values for X, calculate values for Y, plot those points and draw it. This one, using the intercepts method, you don't have to. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the x-intercept where it crosses the x-axis by making y equal to 0. Because we just talked about on the previous page, at wherever the line crosses the x-axis, the y-coordinate will always be 0. So take this equation as it is and replace y with 0. And figure out what x is. Well, what's 2 times 0? Yeah, so that just basically disappears. So we're left with 3x equals 6. So what does x equal? Yeah. So that means it crosses x-axis at 2. So go to your x-axis, find 2, that's a point. That's the x-intercept. Now we find the point where it crosses the y by making x equals 0. Because every point on the y-axis, the x value is always 0. So that's why I can make x equal to 0. So to find the y-intercept, I make x equals 0. Or I replace x with 0. So I get 3 times 0 minus 2 times y equals 6. Well, 3 times 0, that's nothing. So you're left with negative 2y equals 6. If negative 2 times y equals 6, what is y? Negative 3, that's where it crosses the y-axis. And you don't have to write this out all the time. I'm just writing it out for your information. Crosses the y-axis at negative 3. So you go to the y-axis, you find negative 3. There's your 2 points on the line. Okay? Draw the line through it. So you still have to do some algebra. You have to solve a couple of equations, but they're pretty easy equations to solve. Right? But a lot of times the intercepts method is quicker and more efficient than table of values. Okay? You need to be familiar with all the methods. Because what questions I will ask you is I will say, here's an equation, graph it using table of values. Here's an equation, graph it using intercepts. Here's an equation, graph it using the third method, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But then we'll reach the point where I'll just say, here's an equation, graph it however you want. And then you can just pick one of the methods. One last thing. Sometimes a common error students will make here is they find X, they find Y, and they think that this is a point on the line. These are two separate points. These have nothing to do with each other. Okay? So no, 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 no. Definitely not, right? And besides, how do you graph a line if you only know one point? You can't, because you don't know which direction it goes, or how flat or how steep it is. Okay, so that